Welcome to this explainer on how one extraordinary man totally reshaped the map of the ancient world in just over a decade. Let's jump right in, because today we're looking at a guy whose very name has become entirely synonymous with absolute, unparalleled military success and empire building. So, how do you conquer the known world by age 30? That is the exact question we are answering today as we track the relentless, undefeated military march of Alexander the Great. It's almost impossible to overstate the sheer scale of his achievements. In a tremendously short window of time, he single-handedly dismantled the absolute largest superpower of his era and replaced it with a vast new cultural network. Section 1, The Rise of a Prodigy. Okay, let's dive into his early years in Macedon, where this mythic ambition was first forged. Picture this. Alexander is just 12 years old, and his father, King Philip II, buys this massive, famously unmanageable black horse named Bucephalus. Literally no one can tame it. But Alexander notices the horse is simply terrified of its own shadow. So, what does he do? He calmly turns the horse to face the sun, hops on, and rides it perfectly. Seeing this brilliant blend of observation and absolute courage, his dad basically tells him Macedonia is never going to be big enough to hold you. And his education perfectly matched his potential. He was personally tutored by the great philosopher Aristotle in logic, science, and strategy. But he wasn't just some guy sitting around reading scrolls. He was a brilliant, highly logical fighter. By 16, he's already out there commanding troops and crushing rebellions. And at just 18, he leads the decisive cavalry charge at the Battle of Chaeronea, completely shattering the elite and supposedly unbeatable Theban sacred band. Imagine commanding armies and crushing elite veteran forces before you've even turned 20. Well, at the age of 20, right after his father's tragic assassination, Alexander actually takes the throne. He moves with lightning speed to secure his borders, and once his home front is totally locked down, he sets his sights on an incredibly audacious goal, taking on the massive Persian Empire. Section 2, Unstoppable Military Genius. Let's look at how his true greatness shone on the battlefield, overcoming impossible odds time and time again. Right out of the gate at the Battle of the Granicus River, he faces overwhelming Persian forces. But look at the stark contrast in these numbers. Despite being heavily outnumbered, Alexander completely dismantles the Persian defense. He loses a little over 100 guys, while the Persians lose over 5,000. It's an absolute masterclass in revolutionary cavalry tactics. But he wasn't just tactical, he was brilliantly pragmatic. When he reaches the city of Gordium, he runs into the legendary Gordian knot. The prophecy said whoever could unravel it would rule all of Asia. So instead of wasting time picking at tangled ropes, Alexander uses some serious out-of-the-box problem solving. He just draws his sword and slices the whole thing in half. Boom. It perfectly matches his battlefield philosophy: decisive, bold, and totally unstoppable. Now let's move to the Battle of Issus. He comes face to face with the Persian king Darius III. Alexander is massively outnumbered yet again. We're talking about facing over 100,000 men. But he executes an absolute masterpiece of a battle. He hits their lines so incredibly hard that King Darius literally turns and flees the battlefield, leaving his own family behind. His tactical supremacy was simply unmatched. Section 3, Conquering the Persian Empire. With the Persian army on the run, Alexander just never stops moving forward. Just take a look at this wildly compressed timeline. In barely 4 years, he crosses into Asia, wins at Issus, and then performs a staggering engineering miracle at Tyre. Tyre was this island fortress entirely surrounded by water. People thought it was totally impregnable. Alexander's response? He literally builds a half-mile bridge straight through the sea to bring his siege towers to their walls. I mean, who does that? From there, he rolls into Egypt as a liberator and founds the great city of Alexandria. So the crucial point here is Gaugamela. This is where he faces King Darius for the final time. The Persians have chariots with scythes on the wheels, war elephants, you name it. But Alexander spots this tiny gap in their line, forms his men into a wedge, and personally leads a devastating, high-speed cavalry charge right at Darius. The Persian king flees again, the army collapses, and just like that, a 25-year-old is the undisputed king of Persia. Section 4, Marching to the Edge. But, simply conquering the mighty Persian Empire just wasn't enough for him.
His unbelievable hunger for discovery pushed him to march his men thousands of miles further east. He crosses the freezing, treacherous Hindu Kush mountains. He fights incredibly fierce guerrilla warfare in Bactria. He even pushes into India, going up against King Porus and a terrifying wall of massive war elephants at the Hydaspes. And amazingly, through all these new terrains and weird new styles of warfare, he never loses a single battle. Not one.
And through years of grueling warfare, he kept this really sharp intellect. When he met the famously cynical philosopher Diogenes, a guy who literally told the most powerful man on earth to stop blocking his sunlight, Alexander was so impressed by his confidence, he said, "If I were not Alexander, I would like to be Diogenes." But eventually, deep in India, his men were completely exhausted. They begged him to turn back. So, listening to the troops who had loyally won him the world, the unstoppable conqueror finally agreed to head home. Section 5. A sudden, chaotic end. The relentless forward momentum of his life comes to a sudden, incredibly abrupt halt in Babylon. At the remarkably young age of just 32, while planning massive new expeditions to conquer Arabia, Alexander died. He was struck by a sudden, severe illness. Maybe malaria, maybe typhoid, historians still debate it, but in a matter of days, the greatest conqueror in human history was just gone. And because he died so young, he hadn't established a clear successor. When his generals gathered around his deathbed and asked who gets this spectacularly vast empire, Alexander reportedly whispered, "To the strongest." Dramatic? Absolutely. But practically, it plunged his top generals into decades of bloody civil war as they tore apart the magnificent empire he had built. Section 6. The immortal Hellenistic legacy. Despite that immediate political collapse, his monumental achievements permanently altered the course of human history. Just consider the sheer scale of his cultural footprint. He didn't just conquer, he built. He founded over 70 cities, turning places like Alexandria into glowing beacons of knowledge. He completely rewired how the ancient world communicated and traded, practically laying the foundation for modern Western civilization. He spread the Greek language across 3 continents, making it the common tongue that kicked off the glorious Hellenistic period and eventually formed the basis of the Byzantine Empire. Which brings us to our final thought. When you look at his unbroken streak of victories, his unbelievable tactical genius, and what he achieved by the time he was 32, it leaves us with a truly astonishing question to ponder. Has any single person ever changed the map of the world so fast? Thank you for joining me on this explainer, and keep exploring the incredible forces that shaped our world.